As you can see, it's an important issue to the people in the audience. I think it's one of the reasons this race has been so volatile. Voters are looking and they're saying, which of these candidates can I trust? And each of you are trying to make your case to them. As you tried to do so, Governor Romney, you said recently that as governor, you are a severely conservative governor of Massachusetts. What did you mean by that?
Well, severe, strict. I was, without question, a conservative governor in my state. We balanced the budget all 4 years I was in office. We cut taxes 19 times. I enabled our state police to enforce illegal immigration laws so that people could be taken out of our state that were here illegally. We drove our schools to have campaigned for and fought for English immersion in our schools and had that successfully implemented. My policies in Massachusetts were conservative, and in a state, as Rick indicated, a state that was a relatively liberal state. I stood up and said I would stand on the side of life when the legislature passed a bill saying that life would now be defined not at conception, but later. I said no. When there was an effort to put in place embryo farming and cloning, I vetoed that. When the Catholic Church was attacked saying, look, we're not going to allow you to continue to place children in homes where there's a preference for a man and a woman being the mom and dad, I worked with the Catholic Church to put legislation in place to protect their right to exercise their religious conscience. I have, through my record as a governor, demonstrated that kind of conservative belief. But also, look a step back and look at my record running the Olympics. Balanced the budget there, made it successful with the help of a terrific team. Then look back into business. You can't be, I don't believe, anything but a fiscal conservative and run a business. Because you don't balance your budget, you go out of business.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, often when deficit reduction and economic growth are priorities at the same time, some people see a collision, some people see a conflict. You've outlined your views on taxes. Governor Romney today outlined a tax plan that would put the top rate at 28%, eliminate capital gain taxes for incomes below $200,000, cut the corporate tax rate to 25%. Is that the right approach, and is it consistent, and it's a tough one sometimes, with spurring economic growth at a time this state and other states are looking for jobs, but as you have Gilbert's question, also looking to make sure the next president works on the deficit?
Well, look, first of all, I think that Governor Romney today moved in the right direction. And I think that that's a serious step towards trying to find a closer to supply side. I wouldn't agree with him on capping capital gains cuts at $200,000 because I think that's, frankly, economically destructive. And I don't believe in class warfare. And that's a number below Obama's class warfare number. So we can argue later about capital gains cuts. But I think there's a different question. Everybody talks about managing the current government. The current government is a disaster. I mean, we don't, you know, this is, it is, the reason I started with the idea that came out of Strong America Now, to repeal the 130-year-old civil service laws and go to a modern management system, is you change everything. And the fact is, if we're serious, and in a funny kind of way, Ron and I are closer on the scale of change, we'd approach it slightly different, but I think you've got to start and say, what would a modern system be like? And a modern system would be just take control of the border. It is utterly stupid to say that the United States government can't control the border. It's a failure of will. It's a failure of enforcement. So let me just take that one example. Let's assume you could tomorrow morning have a president who wanted to work with your governor, who instead of suing Arizona, helped Arizona, who actually worked with Arizona. Now, what's the fiscal reality 3 years from now in your emergency rooms, in your schools, in your prisons of controlling the border? It's a lot less expensive. You just took a major step towards a less expensive future. So I think it is possible to modernize the federal government and cut taxes and develop energy simultaneously. And the three lead you to Gilbert's concern. Let's get back to a balanced budget.
The Speaker raises an important point about looking forward, and I hope we spend most of the night doing that. But as you know, there's a lot of anger in the base of the party about some of the things that have happened in the past. And the Tea Party especially. Now, earmarks, the pork barrel spending, it's a tiny slice of the budget. I think we all know that. But if you talk to a Tea Party activist, they think it's an example and a gateway to corruption. Senator, you have said there are good earmarks and bad earmarks, and you have talked about your earmarks in the past. Any that you specifically regret? And why have you criticized, why do you think the money that went to Governor Romney for security at the Olympics, why was that a bad earmark?
I didn't suggest it was a bad earmark. I voted for it, and about half the money, little over half the money that went to the Salt Lake Games. But Governor Romney asked for that earmark. That's really the point here. He's out there on television ads right now, unfortunately attacking me for saying that I'm this great earmarker, when he not only asked for earmarks for the Salt Lake Olympics in the order of tens of millions of dollars, sought those earmarks and used them. And he did as the governor of Massachusetts, $300 or $400 million. He said I would be something like I'd be foolish if I didn't go out and try to get federal dollars. So the idea that somehow the earmarks during the time that I was in Congress were this thing that drove up spending in Washington, D.C., if you actually look at it, as I said before, as a percentage of GDP, actually the deficit the debt went down. What happened is there was abuse. When the abuse happened, I said we should stop the earmarking process. But I did say there were good earmarks and bad earmarks. We wouldn't have the V-22 Osprey, which was the most essential air platform for our Marines in particular in the war against the radical Islamists. We wouldn't have it if it wasn't for an earmark. That program would have been killed under George Bush 41. Dick Cheney, the Defense Department, wanted to kill that program, and many of us, including myself, stood up and made sure that was there. Congress has a role to play when it comes to appropriating money, and sometimes the president, the administration doesn't get it right. What happened was an abuse of the process. When that abuse occurred, I stepped forward, as Jim DeMint did, who, by the way, was an earmarker, as almost everybody else in Congress was. Why? Because Congress has a role of allocating resources when they think the administration has it wrong. I defended that at the time. I'm proud I defended at the time because I think they did make mistakes. I do believe there was abuse, and I said we should stop it. And as president, I would oppose earmarks.
Governor?
I didn't follow all of that, but I can tell you this. I would put a ban on earmarks. I think it opens the door to excessive spending on projects that don't need to be done. I think there are a lot of projects that have been voted for. You voted for the bridge to nowhere. I think these earmarks, we've had it with them. If Congress wants to vote in favor of a bill, that they should take that bill, bring it forward with committees, have people say voted up or down on the floor of the House and the Senate, have the president say yes or no and move forward. But the earmark process is broken. There are thousands and thousands of earmarks, money being used inappropriately. And I'll tell you this. You mentioned coming to the Olympics, coming to the United States Congress, asking for support. No question about it. That's the nature of what it is when you lead an organization or a state. You come to Congress and you say, these are the things we need. In the history of the Olympic movement, the federal government has always provided the transportation and security. So we came to the federal government asking for help on transportation and security. I was fighting for those things. Our games are successful. But while I was fighting to save the Olympics, you were fighting to save the bridge to nowhere.
Quickly.
It's really interesting, Governor, because the process you just described of an open process where members of Congress put forth their suggestions on how to spend money, have them voted on individually, is exactly how the process worked. So what you're just suggested as to how earmarks should work in the future is exactly how they worked in the past. So I suspect you would have supported earmarks if you were in the United States Senate.
I'm sorry, the 6,000 earmarks that were put in place under the Speaker's term, for instance, were oftentimes tagged onto other bills. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be critical. That was the process. There were thousands. I mean, we've had thousands and thousands of earmarks. They are typically tagged onto, bundled onto other bills. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Speaker. Go ahead.
You're entitled to your opinions, Mitch. You're not entitled to
I've heard that line before.
Misrepresent the facts, and you're misrepresenting the facts. You don't know what you're talking about. What happened in the earmark process? What happens in the earmark process? It was that members of Congress would ask, formally, publicly request these things, put them on paper, and have them allocated, and have them voted on in committee, have them voted on the floor of the Senate. Congressman Paul,
attached to a bill,
as part of the bill,
and the president can't veto it.
He can veto the bills.
The whole bill, but he can't veto the earmark.
Well, we tried to do that, by the way. I supported the line item veto.
That's what I support.
Hold on. Mitch, I agree with you. I support the line item veto. I voted for a line item veto so we could do just that. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court struck it down. I would like to go back as president again and give the president the authority to line item veto. But that's not the issue. The issue is, were they transparent? And the bottom line was, when I was in the United States Senate, there was transparency, and Congressman Paul, who is one of the most prolific earmarkers in the Congress today, would tell you, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that that's a fact.
Right.
That he
I think you got a better chance to say a word.
Mr. Speaker, you were referenced by the governor. You first, then Congressman Paul. Don't worry, we'll get to you, Congressman, I promise. Good.
Now, look, let me just say flatly, all of you need to think about this, because this is one of those easy demagogic fights that gets you in a lot of trouble. If you have Barack Obama as president, and you have a Republican House, you may want the House imposing certain things on the president. Now, when I was Speaker, for example, and we had a liberal Democrat in the White House, I actually want to reinforce what the governor said. I helped the Atlanta Olympics get the support they needed from the U.S. government to be successful. I thought it was totally appropriate to help the Atlanta Olympics, and I actually went to your former governor and sat down with the people originally planning the Winter Olympics and said, look, this is what we did. This is what you need to do. I think it was totally appropriate for you to ask for what you got. I just think it's kind of silly for you to then turn around and run an ad attacking somebody else for getting what you got and then claiming what you got wasn't what they got because what you got was right and what they got was wrong.
Congressman Paul, answer Senator Santorum, please, sir.
I followed that, and I
You know, there's reason for the confusion because because it's all Congress's fault. They're all messed up. They don't know what they're doing in Congress is the real reason. But this whole idea of earmarking is designating how the money is spent. What a lot of people don't understand is if the Congress doesn't say the way the money should be spent, it goes to the executive branch. And that's the bad part. If you were actually cutting, it would make a difference. But you don't want to give more power to the executive branch. Even if I'm president, I don't want more power over that funding. That should be with the people and with the Congress. But earmarking, the reason we get into trouble is the responsibility of Congress. Take your highway funds. We're supposed to pay a user fee. We pay our gasoline tax. We should get our fair share back. But what do? They take the highway funds and other these trust funds, and they spend this money overseas in these wars that we shouldn't be fighting. And then when the highways need building, then you have to go and fight the political system and know who to deal with and maneuver and try to get some of your money back. But if you say you're against the earmarking and fuss and fume over, the answer is vote against the bill. That is what I do. I argue for the case of the responsibility being on the Congress, but it's the responsibility of us who believe in fiscal conservatism to vote against the bill. We need to vote against the spending is what we need to do.
All right. Let's take another important economic question. This one comes to us from CNNPolitics.com, and you can see it in the audience up on the board here. Why was George W. Bush wrong in his efforts to save the auto industry, and why was Barack Obama wrong to continue the effort? Senator Santorum, I want to go to you first with this question.